Why Hannibal, one of the greatest generals in history, who brought the terror of Carthage across the Alps with war elephants, still failed to conquer Rome. Hannibal invaded the very heart of Italy, won three of the most devastating battles in Roman history: Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae. Yet despite his overwhelming superiority on the battlefield, he not only failed to conquer Rome, but eventually had to flee. Hannibal operated under what is known as a strategy of attrition. He hoped that after a series of heavy defeats, the Romans would break morally and agree to negotiations. But he underestimated the resilience of the Roman Republic. The Romans simply did not surrender, even when he destroyed nearly an entire army. Cannae. More than 50,000 people died in a single day. Rome did not capitulate. Instead, it strengthened its defenses, began forming new legions, and resorted to a delaying war tactic. Moreover, Hannibal lacked support from his homeland. Carthage, although wealthy, did not send him enough reinforcements, money, or equipment. He invaded Italy in an almost adventurous way, with an army recruited in Spain, and without a clear plan of conquest. He was counting on an uprising of the Italian tribes against Rome, but they did not rise in large numbers. Some cities did switch sides to Carthage, but most either remained neutral or stayed loyal to Rome. Hannibal was not prepared for sieges of large cities. He had neither the necessary siege engines nor enough manpower to blockade the capital. Rome was not just a city. It was the center of a vast network of alliances and provinces. Even if Hannibal had tried to take the city, he would not have been able to hold it for long. And without control over Rome, even with full dominance on the battlefield, he could not deliver a decisive blow. In addition, Rome had access to the sea. While Hannibal crushed legions in northern Italy, the Romans supplied the city through ports, moved troops around, and even began raids on Carthaginian territory and its allies. Hannibal turned out to be like a thunderbolt, powerful but short-lived. Hannibal counted on the support of Greek city-states and Italian tribes, but the political situation turned out to be more complex than he expected. Many of these states did not trust Carthage, which was perceived as foreign and barbaric. Rome, despite its cruelty, offered stability, protection, and favorable alliances. Even after suffering defeat, Rome's allies were not in a hurry to change sides, because they knew, if Rome survived, it would take revenge. Furthermore, Hannibal had no clear political program. He did not offer a new system of power, did not promise freedom or privileges. His war was one of vengeance, not liberation. This greatly limited his ability to attract mass support. The war dragged on for 15 years. During this time, the situation changed both in Rome and in Carthage. New generals appeared, such as Scipio Africanus, who decided to move the war to Africa. Instead of chasing Hannibal across Italy, he attacked Carthage itself. This forced Hannibal to leave Italy to protect his homeland. And in the decisive battle at Zama, 15 years after the start of the campaign, he was defeated. The war showed that even the greatest strategist cannot win without resources, support, time, and a clear goal. Hannibal did not conquer Rome because victory on the battlefield is not everything. He lacked support from his homeland, could not organize the siege of the capital, did not receive the expected uprising of the Italian tribes, did not account for the stubbornness and resilience of the Roman Republic, and failed to transition from the tactics of crushing battles to the strategy of conquest and control. He was a genius in battle, but not in politics. And Rome fell not by the sword, but from time, change, and internal decline. But that is another story. One of the key reasons why Hannibal failed to conquer Rome was that he underestimated the moral endurance and inner strength of Rome itself. The Roman Republic was built on principles of discipline, self-sacrifice, and perseverance. Even the worst defeats did not break the spirit of the Romans. After the Battle of Cannae, where more people died than in any other battle in Rome's entire history, the Senate did not declare mourning, did not surrender, and did not begin negotiations. Instead, it began forming new legions. It was a signal. Rome would not give up, even if its walls were surrounded. Hannibal, on the contrary, waged war with a limited resource, time. His army was strong, but over time it became exhausted. There was no reinforcement, no support, no possibility of restoring its strength. He could not give his troops a rest, because a pause meant the beginning of the end. That the Romans could afford to lose, because they believed they would eventually win. Another reason why Hannibal could not conquer Rome was geography and logistics. His march across the Alps became legendary, but it also marked the beginning of his decline. An army crossing mountains in winter with war elephants loses not only people, but also fighting spirit. It becomes exhausted, weakened, and vulnerable. And that was only half the journey. When Hannibal found himself in Italy, he had no stable supply line. All his resources were limited to what he could take on campaign or take from the enemy. Rome, on the other hand, had a developed road system, supply chains, and food storage. This gave it the ability to endure long wars. Hannibal was forced to plunder the local population, which in turn damaged relations with potential allies. So instead of being a liberator, he was often seen as a destroyer. One of the key strategies of Rome when fighting Hannibal was the scorched-earth tactic proposed by Fabius Maximus. Instead of engaging in direct battles, the Romans avoided major battles, wore down the enemy, destroyed crops, moved the population, and deprived Hannibal of the ability to replenish supplies. This greatly limited his mobility and effectiveness. Hannibal was a genius in battle, but he could not defeat an enemy that refused to fight. Although this strategy was unpopular among the Roman elite, it proved effective. It showed that even the greatest general is powerless if deprived of resources and denied a decisive battle. Sometimes in history, the decisive factor is not only strategy and tactics, but simply circumstances. For example, Hannibal could have received help from Macedonia, which was waging its own war against Rome. That the connection between Carthage and Macedonia was weak, and there was almost no coordination. If help had arrived on time, the situation might have been different. Also, Hannibal could count on help from Capua, the second largest city in Italy. But when Rome began the siege of Capua, he could not come to the city's aid. This became a symbol of his helplessness. He could not protect his allies, and therefore could not be a reliable partner. So, Hannibal did not conquer Rome because he waged war by rules that Rome was capable of overcoming. He fought like a genius, but Rome fought like a system. He acted as a man, while Rome acted as a state. Hannibal had no strategy of conquest, only tactics of destruction. He had no support, no logistics, no political program. He could not besiege a city, could not hold territory, could not win a war that required not only victories in battles, but also control over people, resources, and time. Rome won because it did not give up, because it could afford to lose, because it had a system that recovered from defeats, because it had not only legions, but also politics, diplomacy, economy, and will to win. And Hannibal, despite all his talents, remained alone, a great general, but a loser in the big game.